Hey everybody, and welcome to Board Game Heaven. In this episode, I'm going to take a look at Hollywood Death Race by Mangrove Games, designed by Phil Vizcarro. This is a racing game that's soon to be on Kickstarter, and it's a very fun and zany kind of game with a lot of popular culture reference in there. So let's open up the box and set up the game. So the setup for Hollywood Death Race is as follows. First, you decide who plays which of these vehicles, and in this prototype you see here these are standees, but in the final version these will be actual 3D miniatures of all the racers, so that's pretty cool. So first you decide who gets to play first, you roll a die or something, you just decide, and then that player picks one of these vehicles, and if 2, 3 or 4 people are playing, then everybody chooses 2 vehicles. But there's a couple of variants on that. It plays 2 to 6, but if 5 people are playing, then you form 3 teams, and 2 teams have 2 players, and each one choosing only 1 vehicle, and 1 player will play 2 vehicles instead. And if 6 people are playing, then you form 3 teams of 2 players who each play 1 vehicle. So basically that's how you divide in the number of vehicles among your players. And there's also a 2-player mode that adds ghost vehicles, kind of an AI-driven opponent. So you still have 5 racers on the board. So the first player picks a vehicle and places it somewhere on the starting tile, which is always your starting point. For example, that person wants to start at this spot. And then the second player chooses one of the vehicles and places it on a spot, and then the third player chooses a vehicle, places it on a spot, and then if you're playing 3 players, for example, you go back and then the third player picks a vehicle, puts it on a spot, and then the second and the first, here perhaps. So you've placed your characters on a starting line, and you can set up the board any way you like. Just pick some of the maps that you like, and you should count at about 15 minutes per map. So this would be, not counting the corners, so this would be about an hour of playtime. And then at the end you put the finish line like this, and you win the game by racing both of your vehicles across the finish line. Now let me show you a couple more boards here, because the game comes with several boards. We have, as you can see here, already Jurassic Land. These are just corners. We have here a hazardous bridge jump, and there is a Moon of Death here with a trench, and you have to shoot into this torpedo into this hole before anyone can advance, because if you don't, then you will just exit here, circle the trench, and come back here. And there's all kinds of cool movie references. There's a casino here, a very royal looking casino, and there is 2 more of these turns here, as you can see, in a Roman gladiator setting. And there's some monkeys here as well. We've got a backyard where apparently people have been shrunk, and maybe it goes this way, I think. Anyway, and we have a Mall of Death, and zombies will appear on this tile, which is what these fellows here are for. So you got these zombie standees, and they will pop up on these skull icons. And the Jurassic Land has a T-Rex standee, which will come to any sound it hears. If you honk your car, for example, it will follow the sound and it will start attacking your racers. So that's pretty cool as well. And in that way, every one of these tiles has some mechanic that will influence the way you play, and all kinds of stuff can happen. So you've got 8 of these player standees, and you also have some flying cars. In case you have a flying car, like, do I have one? I'll just take this one, for example. So this is a kid on a bike with a little alien in the front, and this guy can fly. So if you have a flying car, you take one of these flight standees, and this is a 3D printed prototype, and this will be translucent plastic in the final version. And you can just put it there and put your character on top, like so. So that's also pretty cool. Then all of these tiles will have several icons on them. There's a crate icon here, and then you take one of these crate tokens and you put them there. And there's green cubes. You can take these. These are called Affexium, and they will grant you special powers that I'll show you in a minute. And there are red cubes as well, and those will grant you hit points. So if you lose hit points, you can gain them back by driving over those and picking them up. So you put all of those on the corresponding spots. And there's also several tiles that require a die. Now these tiles in the prototype don't have icons yet, but I'm assuming that the final version will have icons, because right now they have them in the rule book. I just printed this. And here is also a list of the icons that are on the map, and they will tell you what they do and what you place there. And these are the pictograms that are going to be on the boards, I hope, because that will make it a lot clearer. And you have several things that can happen, and they will tell you what the tile does. So for example, over here in the Death Moon, we've got that, and that icon. So in this case, we see a die here with a number 5. So you take a red die and you put it on the face with the 5 on that map. And every time you go to this spot over here, you shoot a missile, you basically take the white die, you roll it, and if you roll a 5 or higher, you successfully blow up the Moon of Death, and you can cross the finish line in this case. And if you don't, you circle back around and come back here again. But if you roll lower and you fail, then you take this die and you rotate it 1 pip lower. So it gets easier at the end. So it doesn't take forever to finish that map. And the Jurassic Land has one with the number 2 on it. And right now these are in the rule book, as you can see here. So, and you have to look up these icons, and well, they're pretty straightforward. There's one-way maps, so you can't go back on those boards. You always have to move forward. There's an end of turn action symbol, and that triggers at the end of each player's turn. There's noise sensitive tiles, so anything that would make noise, like honking or shooting, gunshots, explosions, you name it, then that triggers that action. There's a 360 board, so you can move freely in all directions. There's boards where you cannot fly. And there's the die, which I already explained. So those are the tiles. And basically that's all there is to it. You just simply pick the tiles you like, you make a board, you can rotate it in any direction depending on how big your table is, of course. You put the corresponding tokens on it, put your players on the start board over here, and then you start playing. Now before I start with the rules, I'll show you all the characters that come in the base game. So we've got Heaty and Peter here, you know, the kid on the bike that can fly. And you'll see here this icon, this wing over here, indicates that it can fly. You've got your hit points over here, where you can, you know, keep track of your health. You know, if you get damaged, you can put a cube there. And there is also special effects, because all of these have their own special abilities, and they call them special effects here. And whenever you gain these green Affexium cubes, you can place them on this gauge over here, and you fill it up, and you can go further than the length of this gauge, of course. And then for the cost of indicated here, of 2 in this case, you can do this special effect. So that's Heaty and Peter on the BMX 1138. Here is Maximus 1, the big old red truck robot, who has this weird transforming sound, and he can transform and pick up cars and throw them away, and you can throw them into hazardous areas so they lose hit points and stuff. And you've got here riding on Affexium, he can repair himself while driving, so that's pretty cool as well. And there's Laura Craft here on her MX-31 DO5, and it is a four-wheel drive vehicle. Oh, I forgot to tell you that this symbol means that you can ram other cars. This symbol means that it's a four-wheel drive, so it can drive over rough terrain. She also has several special effects here. There's Mr. A in the Ventura. It's also a ramming vehicle with lots of hit points. He has some special effects as well. I predict pain! So that's all pretty funny. There's this Thunderstar 66 with Gina and Susan. And, well, as you can see here, they have three different special effects. And they have the Ultra Violence symbol, which means that instead of moving on a turn, because there are several actions you can take, they can do a second attack action instead of moving. There's a Catmobile who can jump with Catman, and he also has two special effects. There's the Dreamlore in 88 with Professor B, this time-traveling flying car. As you can see here, it can fly. It's got a second chance and a seeing the future special effects. And there's a Mitch Knight in the Kitty 2001, who can also jump, as we all know, and he has a pretty big special effects thing here, so that's pretty cool. You can roll a die and then something happens. So that's all of the characters. They're in English and in French on the backside here. And one thing that I found funny was the weird transforming sound in French is actually spelled out. It says croquet croquet croquet. So that's pretty cool, the transforming sound. The French actually have some pretty funny texts on here if you can read French, but fortunately for the English people and people who don't speak French, it's also in English. So those are the characters you can play. Let's go to the rules. So the rules are very simple. You can teach this game in a couple of minutes. You've got three actions per turn, so every player can use three actions. And they can do them in any order that they want to. There's 5 different things you can do. And you can only do each action once per turn, so you can't do double actions unless your character card states otherwise. So you can move, which allows you to move your vehicle a number of spots up to the number on its driver's sheet. It says here on the top right, for example, that Maximus 1 can move 4 spots. And there's others that can move 5 spots, as you can see here. So that's the amount of spots that you can move, and you can move in a straight line or a diagonal line, and depending on the board that you're on, you can sometimes also go back. And then a second action that you can choose is using your special effects. So these on the board, if you have enough Effectium cards, you can cubes, you can spend those and then do that special action. You can also bump another vehicle, so that allows you to hit an opponent's vehicle, sending it for a ride. And if you do it well, you can bump them into a trap or a hazardous area, which makes them lose hit points. And the bump can be done before, after, or in the middle of a move action. So moving and bumping simultaneously therefore counts as 2 actions. So you have to be adjacent on a connected spot to the vehicle you wish to shove, and announce, of course, that you intend to bump it. And then you move the vehicle itself to a forward adjacent connected spot. So for example, if one of them is over here and I'm driving over here, I'm saying, okay, I'm gonna move and bump you. Then you move it there, and then I can choose to move the other vehicle in any connected spot. So if it lands on a trap, you resolve the action, and if there is no free adjacent spot, then the bumped vehicle remains in place, but it loses 1 hit point. Light vehicles cannot use this action because you've got light, medium, and heavy vehicles, and it's this icon over here. So the big truck over there, that means you're a heavy vehicle. And you've got, let me see, you've got here the Volkswagen Beetle over there. That's a medium vehicle. And the little bicycle in the top over there, that's a light vehicle. So light vehicles can't use the bump action. Normal vehicles can only bump other normal or light vehicles, and heavy vehicles can bump any other vehicle they want. So you don't move your vehicle. I did that wrong. So if you're over here and you want to bump, then you don't move your vehicle, you just bump the other one, so like that. And then you could use your move action anyway. So that's why it's two actions. All right, so bumping is one action, moving is one action. You remember that. You can also use a free action, which is honking, so it does not count towards the 3 actions you can do in a turn. You can honk. You just verbally announce that you're honking, and then you make noise, and depending on the map you're on, something can happen. So in this Jurassic Land, you can attract the T-Rex, and bad stuff will happen. And then a 5th and final action you can take is repairing, and that action can only be performed at the beginning of your turn and counts for all actions of your turn. So if you choose to repair, then that's it, your turn is over. So it's basically your whole turn. And you do nothing else, you just refill your hit points on in your card here. You can refill them. And well, that's it. The next turn you'll be ready to get back in the race. So after a crash, your vehicle can be automatically repaired, and don't forget to swap the crash tokens, which are these, and you get a crash token when you've crashed, and then afterwards you flip them over that you're repaired again. This is a toolkit on this. All right. So you can put that on your card, indicating that you have crashed, and then at the end of your turn, you flip that over again. Another important note, of course, is when you're playing 2 vehicles, you can't play the same vehicle twice. You really have to move both of your vehicles, so you can't choose to not use one and use another one twice. Unless, of course, one of your vehicles has already crossed the finish line and there's only one left. But even then, you skip a turn. So you play one turn with the vehicle, then you skip the turn because that one was already over the finish line. The other players play, and then you play again with the vehicle that's still on the board. I'll go into detail a little bit more about the assets that your drivers have. So you've got the ram function, which was different in the prototype version, but I've heard they are going to change it. I talked to Phil Vizcarro about some rules and how we experienced it in the testing of the prototype. And he said that the ram action will now allow you to move through impact spots as if they were normal spots, but you can't stop in them. So these kind of spots with the stars on them, where you would normally suffer 1 hit point of damage, kind of do nothing to you because you kind of barrel through them, but you can't stop there. So that's an advantage that the ramming asset gives you. Then there's the jump asset, and this costs 1 extra movement to activate, and it will allow you to jump over an adjacent spot. So if you want to move and say you've got your car over here, maybe it's over, I don't know, somewhere where there's not 2 spots in a row, but here, for example, here's a hazardous spot and here's a crate, and say I want to go there, then I could use my jump asset and then move 1, 2 plus 1 extra, which makes 3 movement to make the jump, and then I could pick up that crate, and then I'd still have 2 movement left. So I couldn't do another jump unless, for example, I had a card that would allow me to take extra movement. Then I could attempt a second one. So that's the jump asset. Then we have the 4-wheel drive asset. That will allow you to move through rough or damaged terrain or terrain with a fall spot without having any movement penalties. And right now there weren't any on the prototype yet, but they're planning on dividing some of these spots, making them rough terrain or fall spots or any of those to balance out the boards a bit more. So that's going to be in the game as well. Then there's the ultra violence, which I already discussed briefly. It basically allows you to skip your movement action and take a second special effects action, so you can attack twice. And finally there's the flight action, which is a little bit more complex, but it protects you from board effects and attacks from others because you're up in the air. You can be on the same spot as a grounded vehicle, but not another flying vehicle, of course, because then you'd have two of those standees in the way. You can pass any vehicle, even flying ones. You cannot pick up cubes or crates that are printed on the board, and I left them off of the board this time because that was also something that we noticed during playtesting. There were not enough hit point cubes to give all the players to fill their health and place on the board, but you technically don't need to place them on the board because they're already printed. There are a few boards though that tell you to put them on because stuff happens with them. They get moved around or stuff. So that's where you'll place those crates and those cubes if you need them. So that's only on certain boards. But if you're flying, you can't pick those up. Then when you take off, basically you start on the ground and you pronounce that you want to fly, then you take one of those flight stands, put your vehicle on it. That is free. But at the start of your next round, when you're flying, you have to pay 1 Affexium cube. If you can't pay, you crash and you take a crash token, and you either, well, I placed it on the card itself, but the rules say you place it under your vehicle, indicating that you are crashed, and you have to spend your next turn repairing your vehicle, filling up your hit points again with cubes, and then that's the end of your turn. Should you crash into an occupied position because you're hovering above another car, then you just pick an adjacent spot to crash. And you can only change position from flying to grounded or vice versa once per turn, so you can't take off and then land again on the same turn. And you always have to land, of course, on a free spot. So that's what flying does. Now, whenever you pick up one of those crates, you get to draw one of these cards that will give you a special ability or an asset or something. So there's several ones. I'll explain them one by one. Here is a new Affexium. Basically, if you get this card and it has this symbol on it, that means you can keep it, and in contrary to this icon, you don't hold it into your hand. You place it next to your character board so everybody can see what you have. And basically you can keep this, and when you discard it on your turn, you get 1 Affexium cube that you can put on your player board. So there's a new Affexium. The Affexium Strikes Back, which gives you 2 cubes when you discard this card. And the Return of the Affexium, which, you guessed it, gives you 3 Affexium cubes. So that's pretty funny. There's the Cheater card, which lets you, when you discard this, add 1 or subtract 1 number from a die that you rolled. There's Breaking the Fourth Wall, which, when discarded, gives you 1 extra free action. There's Fast and Nitrous, which lets you roll the die, and then you can add that number that you rolled to your movement point, which is what I said when you, for example, want to jump with a car. You could potentially jump twice. There's the Shield card that gives you a shield and shields you from damage. So whenever you would get damage, you'd have to discard this card to prevent 1 point of damage, or you could discard it yourself and just add 1 of those red hit point cubes to your health. There's the Ulysses 32 maintenance droid, who you can discard, and he will fix your car full health, so you get all the cubes back. And that's that. You can also use that whenever you still have some cubes left, or just, you know, just before you're crashing or something. So there's the Rad Gloves here, which lets you change the position of the Affexium cubes on your card. So maybe you've got some cubes on one special effects that you don't want to use on this turn. You want to use another one that doesn't have enough cubes. You can just swap them around any way you wish. There's Back to the Past, which, when you discard, moves all the cards on the board one step back in a straight direction, if possible, so that places everybody back, possibly into traps and stuff. That could be pretty nasty. There's the Crazy Luck card, and this has an immediate effect icon. It's this one, this fist, which means that in this case you draw 3 cards right away, but you will lose them at the end of your round, or you need to use them, because at the end of your turn you can only have a maximum of 3 cards. That goes for everybody. So if you draw this and you already have 3 cards, you better use them or lose them, but you can of course choose which ones to discard. Then there's the Hole, which is an immediate effect, and that makes you lose 1 Effexium card, cube of your choice. Then there is an Explosion, which costs you a hit point. There's the Finishator 2, which is basically the police, and they're limiting your speed to a maximum of 3 for 2 rounds. So that's pretty bad as well. And then there's a very powerful Reboot button, which basically, it tells you here, puts the first card, the one that is closest to the finish, in the second position, the second and the third, and so on, and then takes the last car and puts it in the first position where that car was. So that's pretty powerful as well. And that's all the cards that are currently in this stack. I'm not sure if any stretch goals during the Kickstarter will add new ones, but that's already pretty interesting. So let me show you what this tile does. This is the tile called Honey, I Shrunk the Effexium. And all the players will be small cars moving through this garden. And there's ants as well, and tunnels, and anthills, and all kinds of stuff. And the middle of the map has the spots which are not connected. So you'll have to find a way across this. So when you enter on this side, then you can move onto one of these anthills, and then you need to roll a die, and the dice, the results that you roll corresponds with the numbers on the anthills. Now, of course, you'll need to have some movement left. So, for example, if you are here and you roll a 2, 3, or a 4, you could exit here, but that won't help you. But you can also exit here with a 3 or a 2, or here with a 4, or over there even, and then continue your movement if you have any left. So that's pretty funny. And there's also some spots that give you different kind of risks, because this spider will have 3 of these Effexium cubes on it here, so that's an example where you place them on the actual board, and you'll have to roll a die, and it starts with a 3. So if you roll a 3, a 4, or a 5, you can take one of his or her cubes and continue, but if you fail, then the spider bites you and you lose a hit point. Also, if you succeed a roll on these boards where you have to take something, that goes for the Jurassic Land one as well, with the crates and the cubes, then you roll the required number, and if you do, you take your reward, but then the die goes up 1 point, which makes it tougher for the next guy to grab those items. And whenever a car leaves the map, then the counter goes down 1 again. And over here you've got 3 of these crates, which will give you a card, and you'll have to succeed in your roll as well. And if you fail, you fall into the water, and the garden hose will push you back over here, and your turn will be over, and the next turn you'll start with -2 movement points, unless you've got 4-wheel drive, in which case you can just drive out there again. And then there's these danger spots. All the ants are traveling here and over here as well. And that means if you end your movement on one of those spots, and then at the end of your turn, the ants will steal either an Effexium cube, or in case you don't have that, a card. And if you don't have that either, one of your hit points. And they will take those crates or cubes into the Queen's Lair, which has the number 6. So that's also pretty cool. Stuff will gather here, and there will be some cubes and some crates at the start as well. And if you roll a 6 and have enough movement, then you can move from the entrance of an anthill to spot 6, then take whatever you can carry, and then exit somewhere again. So that's also a pretty nifty mechanic. So this is an interesting board as well. And as I said, this is one of those boards where you actually put the cubes and the tokens for the crates on the board, because stuff happens with that. So my final thoughts on Hollywood Death Race. Well, let me start with the negative things I found after playing this prototype, mind you. There were some balancing issues still in the game, but I've talked to Phil Vizcarro, the designer of the game, and he told me they were still working on balancing some things. And so there were a couple of things that I found strange. For example, the four-wheel drive, there's only one spot on the Honey, I Shrunk the Effexium map where you had a spot in the water where the four-wheel drive would be handy, and otherwise there weren't any. So I already suggested maybe put some in the inner corner, for example, so people don't always automatically take the inner corner and be through the corners fast. So that's a couple of things that they're still considering, and there will be more spots on the different tiles with rough terrain, damaged terrain, and all kinds of stuff. So balancing is still a thing that they're working on, which also brings me to the player count, because when you're playing 2 to 4 players, then you each have 2 cars, and then there's a maximum of 8 cars on the board. And the only rule there is when you're picking cars is that you cannot have 2 heavy vehicles, because that would give you an advantage with the bumping. You can bump everybody, and the lighter vehicles could not bump you. So you're not supposed to have 2 heavy vehicles, but you could potentially take 2 light vehicles and not bump at all. So I wonder how that works. But having 2 different classes of vehicles, and preferably, you know, either a light and a heavy, or 2 different ones at least, that does balance out a bit better. But when you're playing with more than 4 people, 5 or 6, then you're basically splitting up into 3 teams, which doesn't really feel like you're playing a 5 or 6 player game, because you're playing in teams. So technically you're still playing that same 2 to 4 player game, which just happens to cater to more players by splitting up into teams, and then everybody's playing 1 car, and that's it really. So and you have to work together. So really it kind of feels like still a 2 to 4 player game that just happens to be able to be played with more than that. So that's a minor point, but that's just how this game works, and I have to add that it does work well that way. So it's just kind of different from what you may be used to from other racing games. But sure, you know, that's just how this game works, and it does work. We did have fun playing it that way. And then finally, a thing that currently this prototype has is not a whole lot of content. There's the tiles that are in the board. There's 4 corners. There's, I believe, 3 small tiles and 3 large tiles. There's 8 vehicles, of course. But I'm sure that during the Kickstarter, if this game is successful, which I hope it will be, there will be plenty of stretch goals to add more map tiles and more cars to the game, and perhaps even more, you know, special effects for the different cars, more abilities, maybe even more cards that you can draw from the crates with new stuff. Who knows? I am not sure what they will add, but I'm sure it will up the content of this game greatly, because then you can swap around all the different tiles. I mean, you can already with this make, you know, countless of different tracks, but at some point you'll have seen one of these maps so many times that you're thinking, okay, I know exactly how to go through this map as efficiently as possible. I'd like to see something new. So more tiles is certainly a welcome thing, and of course more cars. I mean, who doesn't like all the popular culture references? I would certainly love to see more of those drivers. So that brings me to the positive points of this game, and well, the first one is of course the artwork. This game really pops. It looks stunning. The artwork is great. When I saw this at the Brussels Games Festival, I saw this on the table with that artwork, I was like, oh my god, what is this? I want to try that. And I had a nice chat with Phil Vizcarro, and he told me that it was going to be on Kickstarter. So that's how we got to talking, and that's how I got into possession of this prototype, which is fantastic. And yeah, I'm really glad I got to try this out because it looks great and it plays well enough. You know, it's a lot of fun, and it's a fun light game. And you know, it's not a heavy game, of course. It's a racing game, and those do not tend to be very heavy, thinky games. And you're strategizing, really. You know, you're thinking about what cars will I take and what special effects can they use, and how do I use that to the best of my ability to get ahead. And that's really a lot of fun. You know, it's no brain burner. It's just fun, quick racing game, which you can extend for as long as you want by, you know, making the racetrack bigger, of course. So that's also fine. And well, the theme obviously is great. I like all the Hollywood popular culture movie and TV show references. I'm a big movie buff, and I love seeing all that in a game. So that's brilliant. That is a really big thumb up for me. And you know, other positive points is basically the production value. I mean, this is a prototype, but this already looks so good that the people I play with asked me if this was the final version. And I said, no, this is a prototype. And they were impressed by how this looks. So if this is any indication of what the final product will be like, I can be sure that this will be a fantastically well-produced game with good components, maybe even an insert in the box. Who knows? So we'll have to wait and see for the Kickstarter. So, well, that concludes my, my preview. All in all, with the information I have right now, being a prototype, I can only give this a really big thumbs up, which may even become a thumb and a half after I've seen what the Kickstarter will bring us. So it is definitely something you should check out. I will put the link in the description below as soon as the Kickstarter goes live. So if you're impressed by what you saw and you like the theme and you like racing games, certainly check this out. I'm sure this will be a great game. So check that out. That was Hollywood Death Race by Mangrove Games. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button below and don't forget to subscribe for more videos. Thanks for watching and see you next time on Board Game Heaven.